put your devices on silent mode. Thank you. We will begin shortly. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of everyone at Karachi School of Business and Leadership, I would like to welcome you to today's talk on the future of technology and the technology of the future by Dr. Jose Cordeiro. As part of the school's Eminent Speaker Series, Dr. Jose is an independent consultant, researcher, writer, professor, and a tireless traveler. Let us start the proceedings with recitation of the Holy Quran. I would like to invite Danial Alim from our MBA class of 2019 to come on stage.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. Translation. Read in the name of thy Lord, who created man from a clot of congealed blood. Read, for your Lord is the most generous, he who taught man the use of pen, taught man which he knew not. Sadaqallahul Azim.
Thank you, Daniel, for the lovely recitation. Karachi School of Business and Leadership was established because a group of Pakistani businessmen and corporate leaders recognized that Karachi, the business and commercial hub of Pakistan, needed a world-class business school, promoting economic and social change by developing leaders who will impact organizations through their knowledge, skill, and expertise, as well as contribute to the business excellence by ensuring the application of highly professional and ethical practices in the national and international marketplace. The Eminent Speaker Series is KSBL's initiative to invite honorable guest speakers in an effort to bridge the gap between industry and academia. As part of the ESS, we have amongst us Dr. Jose Cordeiro, who is from MIT. He graduated with a bachelor's and a master's degree in mechanical engineering with a minor in economics and languages. He has also studied in the international economics and corporative politics at Georgetown University in Washington, USA, after which he went for his MBA at INSEAD in Fontainebleau, France, majoring in finance and globalization. Alongside his studies, Dr. Cordeiro worked with the UN Industrial Development Organization in Vienna, Austria, and with the Center of Strategic and Industrial Studies in Washington, USA. He started his PhD at MIT, which he continued in Tokyo, Japan, and completed in Caracas, Venezuela, at the University of Simón Bolívar. Dr. Jose has spent several years as an advisor to major oil companies such as BP, Chevron, Texaco, Exxon, Shell, and Total, among many others. He worked with Booz Allen and Hamilton, specializing in areas of strategy, finance, and restructuring. He has advised several other companies and international organizations in this capacity. At present, Dr. Jose is a fellow at World Academy of Art and Science, chair of Venezuelan node of the Millennium Project, a visiting research fellow at the Institute of Developing Economies in Tokyo, and founding faculty and professor at Singularity University in NASA Research Park, California. He is also an invited professor at several major institutions around the world. Dr. Jose is the founder and president of Emeritus of Future World Society, Venezuela, director of the Single Global Currency Association and the Lifeboat Foundation. He is the co-founder of the Venezuelan Transhumanist Association, a board advisor of the Brain Preservation Foundation, and Center for the Dissemination of Economic Knowledge. Dr. Jose has also authored more than 10 books and co-authored over 20 in 5 different languages, including sections from The State of the Future with the Millennium Project. I would now like to invite Mr. Munir Kamal, CEO of Karachi Education Initiative and chairman of Pakistan Stock Exchange, to say a few words before he invites Dr. Jose on stage.
When I was going through Dr. Jose Cordeiro's resume, if you can call one, I said one man can't achieve that in one lifetime. And this has to be an effort of about 5-6 people. So this is not just a pleasure for me to welcome. It's an absolute privilege to have you here, Doctor. Little bit, and by the way, you may believe people have stopped coming to Pakistan. Dr. Cordeiro has been coming to Pakistan since 1988, and he's going to show you some of the slides also. Very appropriate subject that he's chosen. I was looking at one of his addresses on YouTube, and that was titled, "The Future is Not the Same Anymore." So I don't want to waste too much time. I said everybody wants to come here. Yes, we must thank MAP, which has made his trip to Pakistan this time possible. And he was gracious enough to stay one day more at our request to come to KSBL. It's a new, young institution, and I am sure, Dr. Cordeiro, we will learn a lot and get a lot of inspiration by your lecture today. So thank you very much again for coming, and I welcome you here.
Assalamu alaikum. I first came to Pakistan about 30 years ago because I love the future and I also love history. And Pakistan is one of the countries with the longest history in the planet. And as you know, the Indus Valley civilization started here. So one of my dreams when I was young was to come to Pakistan. And 30 years ago, I visited, obviously, Mohenjo-Daro, an incredible, beautiful place. And then I went also up north to see the Taxila civilization and how this is linked to the future. As you probably know, there is also an engineering and technology university. But in between the past and the future, there are incredible things in Pakistan. Obviously, in the Punjab, Lahore, Islamabad, the beauties of this country are really incredible. And so here we're in Karachi. Did you hear me? Okay, yeah, now it's louder. So, anyway, now we are in Karachi to talk about the future. I think we live in incredible times, and Pakistan has had an incredible past, and it should have an incredible future, like the rest of humanity. I work with different futurist-oriented institutions, like the Millennium Project, that began as the futuristic part of the United Nations. Now we are an independent NGO, and we have nodes of groups of futuristic people working everywhere, including here in Pakistan. We have some people working with us in Islamabad about the trends of Pakistan and the whole planet. We publish every year a book overviewing the global challenges of humanity that we publish annually on a report. And I also coordinated one about the future of Latin America, because I was born in Latin America, and we did a study about the year 2030 and 4 possible scenarios. And I presented that in several places, like the World Economic Forum, that you probably know, Davos, Switzerland. And then I met people like the Nobel laureate, Mario Vargas Llosa, who got in 2010, the Nobel Prize in Literature. And I was talking to him and telling him about the incredible advances in science and technology. And I told him that in 20 years, artificial intelligence will get the Nobel Prize. And he was very scared. And I said, but okay, be quiet, because the first one that artificial intelligence will get is the easiest one, which is literature, which is what he got. Anyway, it is interesting so that you see people are not prepared for some of the technologies coming. I also had the pleasure to meet, before he was president, Donald Trump, and we did a program with CNN talking about the trends of the world. And let me show you some of the trends, like, for example, what is happening with population. Since the 18th century, 19th century, the population was relatively growing slowly. But in the 20th century, population has been growing very fast. Fortunately, now it is stabilizing. Most of the population in the planet is becoming stable and then going down. In the advanced countries, population is going down. As you probably know, in Russia, the population has been going down for about 10 years. The same in China. Very soon, China is going to lose 200 million people between 2030 and 2060. So China is going to lose one Pakistan of population. And Japan actually is shrinking very fast. If the trend continues in Japan, in 2 centuries, there will be no Japanese. So the problem is not overpopulation. The problem is that the population is becoming stable and then beginning to reduce in the planet. Anyway, this is what is happening in terms of people. And look, this is a linear scale. So it is growing, but not that fast. However, economically, the world is advancing very, very fast, as you can see, because this is a logarithmic scale that shows an exponential growth in the GDP, the gross domestic product. Until the year 1800, the human condition was poverty. The average income per capita throughout the planet was about $1,000 per person per year. That was the income in the planet. But then the Industrial Revolution began, and the first countries that became industrialized grew very fast. They got to $10,000 per person per year, and now they are reaching $100,000 per person per year. This is really incredible. But also now, in the last 20, 30 years, the poorer countries are growing faster. What Japan did, then China did, and other countries are doing, including India and Pakistan and Africa, are beginning to grow very fast. They are catching up in the development process. So we are really living in very interesting time. And the first nation that doubled its income per capita was the United Kingdom during the Industrial Revolution. But it required 58 years for the first time in human history to double its income per capita between 1780 and 1838. After the United Kingdom showed that we could develop and that we could advance, other countries have done it faster and faster and faster. Today, the world record is China. China, every 7, 8, 9 years, double its income per capita. And this is beautiful, because this shows that there are no excuses to be poor anymore. There are no excuses to be underdeveloped, because now we know what works and what doesn't work. And we need to learn from the mistakes and discoveries of others. Another example is Japan. Japan is a very tiny country with no resources and with lots of people. Relatively speaking, a higher density, human density than Pakistan. But there is nothing in Japan. Japan is a very poor country. Japan doesn't have natural resources. Japan only has a lot of people, earthquakes, and tsunamis. So actually, the Japanese, they say that Japan is a poor country, a small poor country, but with wealthy people today, thanks to education, science, and technology. And then they say that Pakistan is a huge country, relatively speaking, with lots of resources, but with poor people. Why? Because you are not using education, science, and technology to develop fast. But hopefully, again, this will change fast with places like KSBL, right? Until the 18th century, the human condition was poverty. We were caught in what is called the Malthusian Trap. There was no economic growth. Income per capita, as I said, was $1,000 per person per year. And there was hunger, there was disease, there was early death. The average lifespan was 25 years of age. Average lifespan. How many of you have 24 or less years? Almost no one. Very few people, huh? Very few people. Well, all of the people who have over 25 years, we would be dead 2 centuries ago. I would be dead twice over, okay? So this is very interesting what has happened. Anyway, we abandoned the Malthusian Trap thanks to science and technology. And in the 19th century, the GDP, the economy of the planet grew almost 100%. And in the 20th century, almost 400%. And in this century, we might grow 2,000%, 3,000%. We don't know yet, but we really live in incredible times. I like to say that in the next 20 years, we are going to see more technological changes than in the last 2,000 years. I repeat, in the next 2 decades, we are going to see more changes than in the last 2 millennia. So get ready for an incredible future of changes ahead of us. However, there will be groups that will oppose technology. You probably know the Amish. The Amish, who are a Christian Orthodox group who left Europe and they didn't want any technology and they moved to the Americas. There are Amish in many places, but they all live like they were in the 18th century. They don't have gasoline cars or electric cars, no cars at all. They just have horses. They don't have telephones, they don't have computers, and they don't want them, okay? So some groups will oppose technology, like the Amish. Or, for example, I grew up in South America. In South America, we have Aboriginal people who don't want to do anything like we do today. They also don't want clothes. They don't want, obviously, computers. They don't want to speak Spanish or Portuguese. They speak the languages they spoke 5,000 years ago. And another example, maybe, 5,000 years ago, we had people who did not want wheels, okay? The anti-wheel movement, 5,000 years ago. So there will always be groups that oppose technology, which is what has improved humanity. Humans are more humans thanks to technology. But even in the United Kingdom, when the Industrial Revolution began, there were groups of people who destroyed the machines. They were called the Luddites, because their leader was Ned Ludd, who said, we have to destroy all the machines. We need to eliminate the textile machines because they are taking away our jobs. They are taking away our culture. Fortunately, the Luddites did not win, and that is why the world has advanced. But I repeat, we are going to have Malthusians, Amish, Luddites in the future who will oppose technology, even though the human condition is improving. We also have to change our view of the world. This is the traditional European-centered view. You can see, obviously, Europe in the center, and we have seen this map so many times that actually now even cows have that map. But is that really the view of the world? Well, we have China nearby. How many of you know that China means the Middle Kingdom? China in Chinese has two characters. The first one means center, and the second one means kingdom. The name of China in Chinese is the Middle Kingdom, the empire of the center of the world. And they look at the world this way. So maybe you should begin to also look at the world like the Chinese or like other people. And now that China is with this incredible project, One Belt, One Road, Pakistan is one of the most important countries for China. So this is an incredible opportunity I see for Pakistan. The new Silk Road passes through Pakistan. So this is a fantastic opportunity for Pakistan, for China, and for the world. But again, how you look at the world depends on where you are. If you are in Australia, you look at the world upside down. And if you are in Dubai, you probably look at the world islands. But I want you to see the world with a new face and also see the world with a new behind. And to look beyond the world, because in 10 years, we are going to initiate the colonization of Mars. Right now, there are 4 projects, private and public, and in different countries, to colonize Mars. We will be moving on to Mars in 10 years. And we are going to see the universe with different eyes. And we will terraform Mars. We will change the way and the planet Mars and make it friendly for humans. NASA has a project called Interplanetary Internet so that we can communicate with the Martians. By the way, the first Martians will be humans. And we will communicate with them like we do already in the International Space Station. Actually, at MIT, my thesis was about the International Space Station. At the time, actually, it was called the Freedom Space Station. This was during the Soviet times. And then the USA had a project called Freedom Space Station. When the Soviet Union collapsed, NASA gave it to the world, and it became the International Space Station, which has internet, I repeat. We have internet. If you want to send an email to one of the astronauts, if you know any of the astronauts, you can email them directly. And we are going to map the whole planet. We have Google Earth, as you probably know, and we have Google Moon, we have Google Mars, and we have Google Sky to see the whole space. We are going to be mapping the universe, and we will probably discover life on other planets. NASA has a program to try to look for life outside our planet. In fact, in the next 30 years, it is possible that we will discover at least very elementary forms of life like bacteria in other planets in the next 30 years. But let me tell you what has happened in the last 30 years. 30 years ago, there were no exoplanets. Exoplanets are planets outside the solar system. 30 years ago, we did not know of any planet outside the solar system. Today, we have thousands and thousands of exoplanets, many of them very similar to planet Earth. So the possibility of finding life outside our planet in the next few decades is very high, and this will change our view of the world, our view of life, our view of the universe. It will expand our minds. And we will find the Martians, maybe. But we don't know how they will be, okay? Actually, according to the movie WALL-E, they will be all fat. Why? Because there is less gravity in space, so we will become fatter, maybe. Some people say that this is already happening on Earth, and that is the proof, you know? So we might get there, but how are we going to evolve when we go to space? Hopefully not like that, okay? But maybe we will become more like cyborgs, more like robots. In 2009, a new institution was created in Silicon Valley called Singularity University, which is a very interesting institution that has the wrong name, not once but twice, because it is not a university and it is not about the singularity. So it is a very singular university with the wrong name. However, it is supported by institutions like Google and NASA and many others today, Cisco, Autodesk, and many others. I am one of the founding faculty, and we basically look at exponential technologies and the idea of a possible singularity in the future. We say that the singularity will happen before 2045. And this will radically change humanity forever. One of the consequences of the technological singularity, as you can see, is the year man becomes immortal. But for the ladies here, do not worry, ladies will also become immortal. But this is only one of the incredible consequences of the technological singularity that I will define according to my friend Ray Kurzweil, who also studied in the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and that he describes in his famous book called The Singularity is Near, that between 2029 and 2045, we will have computers so advanced that artificial intelligence will reach human intelligence level between 2029 and 2045. All of you, I hope, will be alive to see this. Okay? And so that you do not sleep tonight, this will be the end of the human age that we know. The end of the human age. But so that you sleep tomorrow, it will be the beginning of the post-human age of humans who are incredibly intelligent, incredibly longevous, living indefinitely. So how can we say that this will happen? Well, because computers are exponentially growing better. Let me show you, if you remember, 30 years ago, we used this technology with computers. I used this 30 years ago. These are the IBM punch cards. This is basically 10 by 100, which is 1,000. This is 1K of memory, 1K. And I used this 30 years ago. Probably you did too, 30 years ago. But this was really bad because you could not change. You had to make holes, and then you cannot take the holes out. So once you use this, you could never change it. And therefore, we moved from mechanical to electromagnetic memories. And let me show you the first generation of the floppy disk. This floppy disk, 30 years ago, was also 1K. But this 1K was better because you could erase. So in Spanish, which is my mother tongue, we pronounce the letter K, K. So we had 1K mechanical and 1K electromagnetic. How much is 1K and 1K? It makes 1 kaka. 1 kaka of memory. I used this 30 years ago. Fortunately, technology has been advancing, and you might remember this. This was 512 kakas, and this is 1.4 mega. And here I have a pen drive from the World Economic Forum of 128 gigabytes. This has happened in 30 years. We have moved from kaka to 128 gigabytes. So let me ask you, what do you think is going to happen in the next 30 years? In the next 30 years, you will remember me, and you will remember kaka. But this will be caca in 30 years. We will have devices smaller than this and more powerful than your brain in 20 to 30 years. And that will be the beginning of the technological singularity. So let me show you then. This is happening in other areas. This is in biology, in medicine. This is my human genome. I'm showing you the partial sequence of my genome. All of you with little devices like this will sequence your genome in the next 5 to 10 years. And you will know which diseases are you going to have. What is the probability of you getting cancer, diabetes, and other diseases? All of you will know what you will die of. Isn't this interesting? But so that you do not die of that, because the medicine of the future will no longer be curative. The medicine of the future will be preventive, and we will prevent the diseases according to your genes. Also, medicine will not be general. Your medicine will not be equal to my medicine. It will depend on your genes, on who you are. So medicine of the future will be personalized. It will not be general. It will be according to your genes, only for you. You will also discover where you come from. And let me show you my paternal line, where the ancestors from my father come from. They come from Spain all the way to Asia, including Mongolia, and some famous people related to my father, Genghis Khan. So no one wants to fight here with me. So this is my paternal line. Now let me show you my maternal line and where my ancestors from my mother's side come from, including Maria Antoinette. I come from a very aristocratic family between Genghis Khan and Maria Antoinette. All of you will know this when you sequence your genome. You will know where your ancestors come from. And if we go back enough in time, 100,000 years, all of our ancestors come from Africa. We humans evolved in Africa. And now you can check it genetically, where we come from, if you go far back enough in time. Anyway, you will be able to reconstruct your genealogical tree and verify for the first time if your father is really your father. But more interesting than going back into the past is going into the future. And we will design our children in the future. Actually, you are part of the last human generation that has not been designed. All of you are here by mistake. In the future, we will genetically engineer our children. Let me show you an example I did with one of my students, sharing genes. This is a theoretical experiment to see which are the genes that you want for your child. This will be a standard in the next 10 years. And if you do not design your child will sue you when he grows up for not designing them. Okay? But you might think this is expensive, right? This is not expensive. It was incredibly expensive when it began in 1990. The Human Genome Project began in 1990, and it finished in 2003. And it cost over $1 billion just to the U.S. government, 13 years, to sequence the first human genome. Today, in 2017, you can sequence your genome for about $800 in 2 days. And we expect that in 2025, you will sequence your full genome for $10 in 1 minute. I want you to look at those numbers because they are incredibly exponential. Exponential in time from 13 years to 1 minute, and exponential in cost from $1 billion to $10. That is incredible. Everybody will sequence their genome in the next 10 years, and you will not cure, you will prevent the diseases in the future. All technologies are changing exponentially, faster, smaller, cheaper, and better. However, our brains think linearly. We think linearly, and we do not understand exponential change. But linear is very different from exponential. Let me give you an example. If I walk 30 steps linearly, each step of 1 meter, after 30 steps I have walked 30 meters. But if I walk exponentially and I double, after 30 doublings I have walked over 1 billion meters. And I have gone around planet Earth 26 times. This is also very famous in chess. If you know how chess game was invented, doubling the amount of rice grains. At the end, it is an incredible amount of rice that there is not enough rice in the world to pay the inventor of chess. Anyway, technology changes exponentially, but we still keep on thinking linearly. So we need to open up our minds because now the world will change exponentially in all areas. To talk about the future, I love Mafalda. Mafalda is a very famous cartoon from Argentina. And when she was asked, what is the future? She answered, the future is no longer what it used to be. Okay, very deep, but it is true. The future is changing very fast. Every area. Let me show you, this is the largest company in Venezuela, the country where I was born, Petróleos de Venezuela, the petroleum company of Venezuela. And none of you know it. And it is the largest company of Venezuela, it is the largest company of South America, and it is larger than any Pakistani company, I think. Well, I haven't checked, but it's pretty big. Anyway, so you don't know it. But all of you know Mickey Mouse. And I love Mickey Mouse if you look at my tie, because Mickey Mouse is an example of mind-facturing. We need to move from the manufacturing into the mind-facturing. We need to add value. We need to add value in every sense. To show you how much I like Mickey Mouse, I will put on my Mickey Mouse hat, which is made of Venezuelan petroleum. This Mickey Mouse hat is completely made of petroleum. The plastic of the ears come from petroleum, the synthetic fiber from petroleum, the acrylic paint from petroleum, my polyester tie also from petroleum. How much do you think is a Mickey Mouse hat, these Mickey Mouse ears? How many dollars? $5. If you buy it in China, probably $1. But if you buy it in Disneyland, it is $10. $10. Or as the Americans say, $9.99. And it is made completely from petroleum. How big is a barrel of petroleum? Like this. And how much does it cost? $50. $50. How many Mickey Mouse hats can I make from a barrel of petroleum? Let's say $1,000. $1,000 times 10, $10,000 in Mickey Mouse hats. And the barrel of petroleum is $50. So what is the business? Is the business in the raw materials or in adding value? We need to add value. I'll give you another example from another country. How many of you know this? Who knows? No, the one on the left. Starbucks you probably know, or at least you can read. But this, does anyone know who this is? This is the symbol of the Colombian exports. His name is Juan Valdez. For those of you, since you don't know it, also, people outside Colombia don't know it. Just like people outside Venezuela don't know this. So this is the Colombian export symbol. And I'll explain it to you. It's a Colombian with a mule and white bags. When I say, oh, Colombian, mule and white bags, cocaine. And I say, no, it's not cocaine. The largest export of Colombia, which is coffee. But no one knows Juan Valdez from Colombia, but everybody knows Starbucks. So the point, once again, is that even though Colombia is a powerhouse in coffee, no one knows it and no one recognizes the logo, but everybody knows Starbucks. And Starbucks today sells more than 10 times all the coffee exports from Colombia. So what is the value? The value is never in the raw materials, never. It is in adding value in the mind-facturing. All the industries are being disrupted. As you probably know, Uber is the largest taxi company in the world, and it does not own one single taxi. Facebook is the largest media group. Alibaba, the largest warehouse retailer in the planet. Airbnb, the largest hotel chain in the planet. It's bigger than Marriott and Hilton and Intercontinental combined. And it does not own one single room. We futurists, we talk about 4 ways to think about the future. The worst way is to be passive, like an ostrich. I hope you are not ostriches, because ostriches are not from Pakistan. A little bit less bad is to be reactive, like a firefighter. You come out when there is a fire. It is better to be proactive when you buy insurance, when you prepare yourself for the future. But the best is to be proactive, because you can create the future. You can visualize the scenarios, good scenarios and how to get there, and bad scenarios and how to avoid them. So I hope we have no ostriches in this room at KSBL. But if we do, they should be technological ostriches, okay? To see the future, to see the technologies, to fly, to think outside the box. 10 years ago, I went to visit Sir Arthur C. Clarke, the very famous science fiction author, who was an electric engineer from the United Kingdom, and he lived in Colombo, Sri Lanka. So I visited him in Colombo, and he's very famous for science fiction books and science fiction movies like Space Odyssey 2001 and many, many others. And he also wrote the 3 laws of the future. First law of the future. When a famous scientist says that something is possible, he's probably right. But when he says it is impossible, he's probably wrong. Second law, the only way of discovering the limits of the possible is to venture past those limits into the impossible. And third law, the only way, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. This has a corollary. If you see a technology that does not look like magic, it is not advanced, okay? So I will talk now about magic, because we are going to see magic in the future. 30 years ago, personal computers were just beginning. When I finished my bachelor's degree thesis at MIT 31 years ago, there were no personal computers. I used a primitive technology called typewriter. I don't know if you have seen typewriters. A primitive technology. 20 years ago, mobile phones were beginning. Today, everybody in the planet has a mobile telephone. Everywhere. In Africa. Anywhere. If you want to have a mobile phone, today you can have a mobile phone. But they didn't exist really a few decades ago. 10 years ago, Google, Facebook were growing. So what are we going to see in the next 10, 20, 30 years? We are going to see magic. I repeat, also because these changes are exponential. You cannot look at the last 30 years and think that the same will happen in the next 30 years. No. We are going to see in the next 30 years more changes than in the last 3,000 years. So I hope you open your eyes to what is going to happen. One of the things we are going to do is we are going to control the aging process. In fact, we say that aging is a disease, but it is a curable disease. One of my friends created a foundation, the Methuselah Foundation, for longevity and rejuvenation of mice. This was done 10 years ago. Since it was created, they have been able to expand the life of mice 3 times. Today, we have mice that live the equivalent of 300 human years. Now, we have mosquitoes that live the equivalent of 4 times their previous lifespans, and worms that live 6 times their previous lifespan. In fact, even more interesting, today we know that cancer cells are biologically immortal. Let me ask you, and I know you are a very educated group of people, but how many of you actually knew that cancer cells are immortal? Okay, a few of you, and probably because of tragic reasons of having friends with cancer. Okay, the proof that immortality is possible is that cancer discovered how not to age. Cancer cells do not age. Cancer cells are mutations that stop aging. And this was discovered in 1951 with a patient called Henrietta Lacks. The scientists took the tumor and began analyzing the tumor, and the patient died. Henrietta Lacks died. But the cells are alive today. They are the most famous biological cells. They are called HeLa cells in her honor. And these cells are immortal. They do not age. That doesn't mean that they are completely immortal, because if you kill the cells, they die. But they do not age, and they could live indefinitely forever if you don't kill them. Okay? And this was discovered in 1951, and very few of you know it. This shows the failure of medicine today. Medicine today is a caca. It's a primitive science compared to what we are going to have in 20 years. In 20 years, I repeat, we will not cure diseases anymore. We will prevent diseases with advanced medicine. But not only cancer is biologically immortal, even more interesting, germinal cells, which are the best cells in our bodies, the cells for reproduction. Germinal cells make a sperm in men and eggs in women. They do not age. They are also biologically immortal. The problem is when the person dies, the germinal cells who are in the body also die because there is no more food. But the germinal cells are biologically immortal. So the proof that immortality is possible is that the best cells do not age and the worst cells do not age. In fact, there are very simple life forms that do not age also. Hydras, medusas, corals, they do not age. They could live indefinitely, forever, if you don't kill them or if they don't have an accident. Now scientists are beginning to study regeneration scientifically and how this happens in certain animals and how we could apply this to humans, including now to grow fingers. This is being done right now. And growing organs with biological 3D printers. We will be able to print our own organs. And something that might be a little bit freaky in China. In China, they are working on body transplants or head transplants. It depends on what you look at. If you look at the head or if you look at the body. But in China, they are working on this, and they plan to do the first human head transplant or body transplant next year in China. There was a Nobel Prize created in Silicon Valley for immortality. It is a medical doctor who is giving $1 million to pay for the scientists who advanced in curing aging. It's called the Palo Alto Longevity Prize in Silicon Valley. One friend of mine, Aubrey de Grey, has a foundation for curing diseases. And Google, 4 years ago, created another company whose objective is to solve death. Death is a technical problem that we can solve in the next 20 to 30 years. So people in Silicon Valley today realize that aging really is a disease, but it is a curable disease that we can cure in the next 20 to 30 years. But not only Google, also Microsoft. Microsoft has announced that in 10 years it will cure cancer. And why? Because after sequencing the human genome, you can check the mutations of cancer. Cancer is like a virus that you can sequence and attack. In 10 years, we should be able to cure all cancers. And again, this is not a medical company. It's not a pharmaceutical company. It is an IT company, because that is what cancer is, mutations in the genome. And Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, who has Chinese ancestry, Priscilla Chan, they are donating all of their fortune, which is a lot of $1 billion, to cure all diseases, including aging in this generation. Okay? So people are realizing that aging is a treatable problem that can be solved. But if you die now, we have plan B. Because unfortunately, people will still die in the next 10 years. In the next 20 years, people will die. We don't have the technologies for rejuvenation yet. But then we can cryopreserve you. In fact, there are hundreds of people who are cryopreserved, and this actually began with the sperms and eggs and embryos. In fact, in vitro fertilization depends on frozen embryos or frozen eggs or frozen sperm. Also, for people who tell me that this is not possible, that cryopreservation is not possible, I say, what do you mean it is not possible? There are thousands and thousands of humans that were cryopreserved already as little humans. Okay? So this has been evolved in the last 50 years, and we have been able to cryopreserve tissues, organs, and whole bodies. There are hundreds of humans cryopreserved in different centers, like this one in Arizona, or this one in Moscow, outside of Russia. I just visited recently. So all these people obviously are waiting for the technology for reanimation, which we expect to have between 30 and 40 years from now. Actually, I was in charge of cryopreserving the first person in Spain last year. This was a friend who died, and then with other friends, we cryonically suspend him. But anyway, this is plan B. I do not recommend plan B. I recommend plan A. I am also part of the organizing committee of a festival called RAD. RAD means Revolution Against Aging and Death. And I invite you all to come to San Diego, California, next September, and you will meet the first human being that is being rejuvenated now with experimental treatment. This person here, Liz Parrish, she is undergoing 2 experimental treatments to be rejuvenated now. Okay? So again, this is not science fiction. Don't believe me. Come to California and meet her. As Woody Allen said, I don't want to achieve immortality through my work. I want to achieve it through not dying. Very simple. So which are the technologies that will allow this to happen? The National Science Foundation in the USA with the Department of Commerce, they talk about 4 technologies: nano, bio, info, and cogno. And these technologies are converging towards the technological singularity in the next 20 years, 30 years. Nanotechnology studies atoms, biotechnology studies cells, infotechnology studies bits and bytes, and cogno studies neurons, the brain. And they are converging. Nano and bio, above, are the hardware of life, and info and cogno are the software of life. And we are going to reach the complexity of the human hardware and the complexity of the human software in the next 20 years. And we will improve on the human hardware. We will improve on the human software. And this is in the real world, but we also have the virtual worlds in the future. This is Microsoft HoloLens that will allow you to share virtual reality. You will create realities that you will share very soon. But let's go back to the real world, not yet to the virtual worlds, and let's talk about the 4 technologies. Number 1, nanotechnology. Nanotechnology is arranging matter atom by atom. It's doing things at perfection. Nothing more, nothing less. With nanotechnology, you will be able to design a small engine. This is the smallest possible engine made at perfection, made atom by atom. With nanotechnology, there will be no waste in the future. And the cities of the future will be incredibly modern, incredibly advanced, and incredibly clean, because there will be no waste. The word garbage will disappear in 20 years. There will be no garbage in 20 years. There will only be raw materials in the wrong place. Second technology, biotechnology, which is living nanotechnology. Some scientists are already creating transgenic species, like these glowing fish that were created in Taiwan. These glowfish are fish that have the gene of the fluorescent medusa, and they glow at night with different colors. This is the beginning of new life forms that we can create. One of my students at Singularity University copied this idea to make glowing plants. And he financed this with Kickstarter. He wanted $65,000, and in 1 week he had over $300,000. And in 1 month he had over $500,000 to make glowing plants. But he didn't begin with any type of plant. He began with tobacco, and tobacco is a very good plant for many people, so now he's making glowing tobacco. And we also have a new discipline called de-extinction. We will be able to bring life forms who were extinct until now, like the mammoths. One of our professors actually sequenced the genome of the mammoths, and there are hundreds of mammoths frozen in Siberia and in Canada, and we can recreate the mammoth. This is like the movie Jurassic Park, but in reality. Yeah, dinosaurs we cannot do yet because the DNA can only be recovered as of now, maybe 5 to 10, 20,000 years ago. Dinosaurs died millions of years ago. Yes. So, but maybe a mammoth or a Neanderthal man, the Neanderthal man we could recover. And then we have cloning. But cloning we are going to use not for reproduction. For reproduction, it is better the traditional system. Cloning will be used for medical purposes, for therapeutic purposes. If you need a new heart, you can clone your own heart with your own cells, or a new lung. So cloning will be used for medical reasons, and many countries are working on cloning, like Singapore. Singapore created an incredible place called Biopolis, the city of life, where they are cloning all kind of species now. And also Russia is working on cloning. But you have to be careful with the Russians. You never know what the Russians think. A very interesting country actually is India. I visited 5 years ago a biotechnology center in Hyderabad in India. And as you know, Indians have very funny gods. They have gods with 3 heads, they have gods with 8 arms, they have gods with wings. If you have 3 heads, 8 arms, and wings, you are divine in India. Actually, anywhere, because if you have that, you are going to be quite different. Anyway, so because the Indians believe in reincarnation, in rebirth, they are working on cloning. Cloning is the biological equivalent of rebirth, reincarnation. So I'm telling you this so that you think about the possibilities, because other cultures think differently, and they are working on these things differently. I want to give you 2 numbers. This is the first number, which is the complexity of the human hardware, the human genome. How complex are we biologically? In the year 2000, the scientists created the first artificial virus, but the viruses are very small, very tiny. So they were the first life forms created. In 2010, the first bacteria, artificial bacteria, was created. And the scientist who created it, Craig Venter, who also teaches at Singularity University, to prove that he created the bacteria, he wrote his email in the genome of the bacteria. This is the first bacteria that doesn't have a father bacteria or mother bacteria, but it has email. Bacteria are bigger. This was done in 2010. When do you think we are going to get to the complexity of a human? This is a matter of time. We estimate between 20 and 30 years, we will get to the complexity of the human body. Actually, this sequence is a genome. The human genome is 3 gigabytes. All of you have 3 gigabytes of information. This pen drive has 128 gigabytes. How many humans can I put in this pen drive? How much is 128 gigabytes divided by 3 gigabytes? 42.6. I can put the genome of 42 humans and a little cat in here. Okay, so I want you to remember this number, the complexity of the human hardware, which is 3 gigabytes. Now let's move into the software. What is the complexity of the human software? The human software, because we are really walking information, we are walking data, computers are advancing, and in 5 to 10 years, we will get to the complexity of the brain of a mouse. 5 to 10 years later, the complexity of a brain of a monkey, and 5 to 10 years later, the complexity of the brain of a human. And through the 5th generation of telecommunications, everything will be connected to everything, even holographic connections and transmissions. And the children will be born connected to internet. A friend of mine says that the first thing that a child will say is that I need more broadband. And we will be able to connect our brains. In fact, this is called the Internet of Things. Everything will be connected to everything in the next 2 decades. Your refrigerator, your car, your home, your brain. Everything will be connected to everything. These are the Google self-driving cars. If you notice, these cars don't have anymore a driving wheel. There is no driving wheel. Actually, there is no accelerator. There is no brake. You will talk to the car in the future. You are part of the last human generation that drives. And thanks God, because we are bad drivers. I don't know if you have driven through Karachi. So we kill 1 million people driving every year. This will not happen with self-driving cars. In fact, we will have internet everywhere. Eric Schmidt from Google, in 2013, he said that by 2020, we will have free internet throughout the planet. Actually, he now apologized. He said it's not going to be in 2020. It will be in 1 or 2 years before the deadline. We are going to have free internet in the whole planet and without password everywhere, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, in the middle of the South Pole, so that the penguins also have free internet, everywhere. Google is working with balloons, and Facebook is working with drones, and there are 3 companies working with microsatellites. I don't know if the microsatellites will win, or the drones, or the balloons. But I know that in 2 years, we will have free internet in the whole planet. This will change humanity, because there will be no limits to knowledge. No limits to knowledge. You will be able to access all of humanity's information for free in 2 years. In fact, in 3 years, you will not be able to say anymore, I don't know. Because if you want to know, you will be able to know. And artificial intelligence is coming. In 20 years ago, 1997, IBM created a computer called Deep Blue that beat Garry Kasparov, who was the last human who could win still against a computer. Now no one can beat a computer in chess. And then IBM created Watson to play a very famous TV show called Jeopardy. And in 2011, Watson beat the 2 experts in the world in Jeopardy. Now no human can beat Watson. Actually, it is impossible. Watson was born with Wikipedia in its head. How many of you have Wikipedia in your head? How many of you remember 1% of what you have read in your lives? Watson remembers it all. And some people say, but Watson doesn't understand. Well, it understands at least as well as you do. And Watson understands jokes and understands music. It's like an airplane. You know, an airplane flies, right? Flies very different from a bird, but it flies. Watson is intelligent. It's very different from a human intelligence, but it is intelligent. Now Watson is being used as the best medical doctor because Watson is reading all the books in medicine and is having all the genomes of people, so it will be the best medical doctor. However, these technologies, these artificial intelligence are bad because they were programmed. Now there is a new type of artificial intelligence that learns by doing. It's called deep learning, And one of the first examples is AlphaGo from Google that beat the world expert in Go. And it was not programmed. This is the interesting thing. The new artificial intelligence is no longer programmed. It apprends like you and I. It apprends by watching, it apprends by, it learns by doing. And we get to the final technology, the most interesting one because it has to do with the brain. The brain is the most complex organ in the body, and is the only organ that we cannot still do artificially. Today we can do artificial hearts, artificial lungs, artificial bones, artificial skin, artificial pancreas, artificial everything except for brains. Why? Because the brain is the most complex organ. Even more interesting, the brain is the most complex structure in the known universe. There is nothing that we know in the universe today more complex than the human brain. Well, maybe tomorrow a Martian arrives on planet Earth and he has a more complex brain than we do. But until that happens, there is nothing more complex than the brain of a man. Well, yes, the brain of a woman. That's more complex. So the brain is really the final frontier. And the brain evolved like all animals. One human is only 1% different from the chimpanzee. Now that you can sequence the genome of the chimpanzee, you will see that we are only 1% above of the chimpanzee. And we are 10% above of a mouse. So if someone calls you chimpanzee, don't get upset. You say, and you are a chimpanzee too. We are all chimpanzees in a way. The brain used to have three major parts: the reptilian brain of the instincts, the limbic brain of the emotions, and the neocortex of intelligence. Now we are talking about an exocortex, a new superbrain, the cloud, internet, that we will connect to our brains. Sergey Brin, co-founder of Google, says that he wants Google to be the third half of your brain. This is very deep. The third half of your brain. And then it will be the fourth half of your brain. And then the fifth half of your brain. And the sixth half of your brain. And soon you will have more brain outside than inside. So how complex is the brain? This is the second number you need to know, with the complexity of the software. The hardware is 3 gigabytes, and the software is this. One brain has 10 to the 11 neurons. That is 100 billion neurons. Each neuron has about 1,000 connections. That makes 10 to the 14 synapses or connections. And the brain has 6 main frequencies: alpha frequencies, beta frequencies, gamma frequencies, etc. So that makes about 10 to the 17 operations per second. The complexity of the brain is that number, 10 to the 17 operations per second. And we will reach that complexity in the next 20 years. If we don't talk about the soul, the spirit, and the mind, okay? But I don't talk to that about that until questions and answers maybe. So this is the complexity of the brain, but there are also small brains, okay? This is a small brain. Scientists have been working on connecting the brains of animals. 10 years ago, they connected the brain of mice. A few years later, the brains of monkeys. And now we can connect the brains of humans. This is a device I use with my students to read their minds. This is the beginning of technologies that will allow us to read minds. This has basically one electrode. It is like an electroencephalogram, that you can read what is happening in the frontal lobe of your brain connected with a ground connection to your ear, and then transfer from your brain with a Bluetooth connection to a computer. We will be able to send from our brain the signals, what we are thinking, what we are feeling, to computers, and then to other brains. This is the beginning of telepathy. We will be communicating telepathically in 20 years. Talking is very primitive. Talking is very narrow bandwidth and very slow. Everything I want to tell you is in my brain, but I cannot express it because talking is a primitive way of communication. Very slow and very narrow bandwidth. This presentation in 20 years will take 1 second. 1 second. It will go from my brain to your brain thanks to telepathy. And there are devices now with 14 electrodes, and soon we will have devices with 100 electrodes, with 1,000 electrodes, and we will capture most of what is in your brain and transfer it to other brains or to computers. And we will be using more and more robots. This is the famous Asimov robot by Honda, the last 15 years. Can you imagine the next 15 years? In 15 years, Honda is going to be almost, Asimov is going to be almost human. And they will have feelings. Robots will have feelings. This is research being done at my alma mater, MIT. In the MIT Media Lab, there is a group of scientists trying to understand the feelings of robots. And in the Congress of Korea, they are studying a law, they are writing a law to give human rights to robots in 10 years. This has been discussed in the Congress in South Korea. I don't know what is being discussed in the Congress in Pakistan, but in South Korea, they talk about human rights for robots. And robots will be fantastic. Look at those robots. And for girls also, there will be fantastic robots. But we think robots are bad, right? Because of Terminator. Actually, you know who he is, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who became governor of California for 8 years. Actually, he inaugurated Singularity University as the governor of California. Or as we call him in California, the governator. The governator. And he said that he was happy that there is an institution preparing humanity for the future because the science fiction of today is the science reality of tomorrow. But we think robots are bad, female robots are bad, and even when they do robot love, they are bad. But are robots good or bad? It depends on where you are born. If you are born in Japan, you know robots are good. Actually, robots are better than humans in Japan. In Shinto, the religion of Japan, they also consider that robots have a soul. So even though you might not like robots here, they love robots in Japan, and in Korea, and now in China. And all Japanese companies and Korean companies are making robots, and we are going to have more sophisticated robots. But this is not humans versus machines. This is humans and machines, like the first human cyborg, Oscar Pistorius, in the London Olympic Games. And those legs that you see are nothing compared to the bionic legs we are going to have in 10 years. We are going to have bionic legs better than human legs in 10 years. In 2014, in the World Cup in Sao Paulo, there was a group of paraplegic people that had mind readers like I do, with 50 electrodes and an exoskeleton. And the paraplegics on wheelchairs, they thought about standing up. With their mind readers, they stood up and they walked with their exoskeleton. This was done in Brazil in 2014. And last year, in Switzerland, we had the first cyborg Olympic Games of humans with no legs, humans with no arms, humans with missing parts of the brain. But with technology, they were augmented. So people in this cyborg Olympic Games, they were disabled. but with technology they became super able. This is going to happen because of disabled people. Who is going to say to a blind person that he cannot see? And he will see better than you and I, because bionic eyes will be better than human eyes. And in 2020, we are going to have the first Olympic Games in Japan for robots, only robots. They will have the traditional, normal, boring human Olympic Games and the first robot Olympic Games in Tokyo. All of this is called transhumanism, which is using science and technology to transcend human limitations. Humans are not the end of evolution. We are the beginning of technological evolution. But we have to do this carefully because we don't want to finish like that. Humans have existed in our planet only 100,000 years. Dinosaurs existed for 200 million years. 200 million years. We humans have existed almost nothing compared to dinosaurs. Anyway, this continues, but the good thing is we are going to cure all diseases. In 5 years, we will have no longer paraplegics. We will cure these. Probably maybe even as soon as 2 to 3 years. There is incredible research in China and in the USA to cure paraplegic animals. Paraplegic pigs are cured today. This will begin soon in human trials. We will cure all these horrible diseases. We will not have these diseases. There will be no Parkinson's in 20 years. There will be no Alzheimer's. And there will be no aging in 30 years. We are going to see what we call the death of death. Death will be optional in the future. But there is always yin-yang, as the Chinese say. And yin-yang is so complex that inside yin-yang there is little yin-yang. And inside there is even more yin-yang. So we have to think about the future, worry about the future, because there is always the dark side of the force. I'm talking about the dark side of the force. This is the beautiful picture of NASA at night, the world at night by NASA. And I like it because the Chinese say, let's light up the world. The Chinese say, do not blame darkness. It is better to light up a candle. And I am going to be next month in Korea. And if you see Korea, there are 2 Koreas. Why are there 2 Koreas? Because there is South Korea of the future, very advanced, with the best internet in the world. And there is North Korea, which is the last country in the planet and still without internet. Actually, 50 years ago, Pakistan was more advanced than South Korea. Only 50 years ago. And now South Korea is a leading world power. And North Korea is a disaster, even worse than Pakistan, yeah? This is like the worst country in the world, North Korea, even though they have nuclear weapons. So anyway, where do we want to take Pakistan? Where do we want to take the world? The way of South Korea or the way of North Korea? So we have to meditate. I meditate in different places, even here in Pakistan. When I go to Japan, when I go to India, everywhere we need to meditate. We need to think about the future. And I finish with this beautiful Chinese word. This word in Chinese means crisis. We are living through a crisis in the planet. And the crisis has 2 parts. The first character means danger. But the second character means opportunity. We are in an incredible crisis with a lot of danger, but also a lot of opportunity. So, thank you very much.
The floor is now open for questions. If you could raise your hand, a microphone will be brought to you. Kindly state your name as well.
Professor Cordeiro, thank you. Fascinating talk. Really an eye-opener. My question is more around the politics of all of this. Because I have no doubt, and I think people in the room have no doubt, that this technology and defeating aging and genetic engineering, all of that is possible. But politics, in our case, trumps technological development. So for example, to take a case from my industry, which is renewable energy, we know the threat to the climate and to this planet from carbon emissions. But I think a lot of countries continue to tread the path of more coal power, more fossil fuel-driven power, and we are probably not moving towards renewable energy fast enough to prevent climate change. Stem cell research is another case where I think political will is lacking. So how do you see the future of politics, and do you think that will be a big hindrance for technological developments in the future? Thank you.
Well, I'm going to answer with this primitive communication technology called talking. In 20 years, we will discuss this in 1 second. Very quickly, very efficient. We are going to communicate better, faster, with a broad bandwidth. But yeah, your question is very important. We were just talking before about renewable energy. I am writing right now 2 books. One is the transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy, that people still think it's far away, but it is growing exponentially. Every 2 years, solar and wind are doubling, every 2 years. We are actually only 7 doublings away from 100%. We can do it right now, the computation, because we are at 1%, 2017. Then at 2019, we are going to be at 2%. And 2021, we are going to be at 4%. And 2023, we are going to be at 8%, and so on and so forth. And by 2030, we are going to be around 100%. People still don't see it because there are many interests. And actually, not just governments. I think it is the industries that make gasoline cars and the companies that produce petroleum who are the big enemies. And there is a disruption, and this disruption comes from outside. So the incumbent companies, the incumbent politicians don't see this coming. But the transition is so powerful. This is a tsunami of technology, which is unstoppable. Also, traditional medicine doesn't want many of these changes. You know, companies that have been selling little drugs to cure cancer, do you think that they want Microsoft to cure cancer in 10 years? They don't. They don't. There are many vested interests in all of this. However, I repeat, I think this is so big, so powerful, and almost anyone can do it because the technologies are becoming so cheap that a high school student might be able to discover the cure for different cancers today. It was obviously impossible even 5 years ago. But today, anyone has almost unlimited knowledge. And with free internet in 2 years, we are going to live in a different world. But going back to politics also, I think this is changing radically. Since we are all connected, we will have more electronic voting and more direct democracy in the future. I think this is the way of the future. Estonia is doing e-voting, e-elections, e-everything now for government. And it has been very successful. And other countries are copying the example of Estonia. So I try to be optimistic. I think we are going to live also in a more advanced political world, not just more advanced technological world, and more advanced humane and ethical world, which is also important.
Assalamu alaikum to everybody, and good evening, Mr. Cordeiro. I would like to point out towards your summarizing it, the death of the death. What I want to know is, has the technology of the future worked on the doomsday coming, when the sun would be rising from the west, not from the east? How much time we have? In 20, 30 years, we are going to see a new world, but how much time do we have to see that? I'm talking about, have we the future technology calculated the time when everything would be over?
Well, we do live in incredible times because of these technological advances. And the problem is that technology can also be used for bad purposes. Even one of the first technologies that humans invented, fire. Fire can be used to warm your food, to warm yourself, or to burn your enemy. Nuclear energy, the same. Nuclear energy can be used to produce electricity or to make nuclear weapons. So the problem is that these technologies every time are more advanced, more powerful, and they can destroy us as well. So we have to be careful about how we use these technologies. But because we are going to be more intelligent, thanks to artificial intelligence, I think we should be able to overcome the problems of self-destruction, which are real. I don't want to minimize this. When I interviewed Sir Arthur C. Clarke in Sri Lanka, I asked him, do you think that there is intelligent life in the universe? And he said, well, I'm not even sure that we have even intelligent life on planet Earth. So to talk about the rest of the universe it's almost impossible. So the problem is, yeah, we are not that intelligent. Humans are not that intelligent. That is why we still have poverty. We still have hunger in a world full of resources. So the problem is us. We are not ethical enough. We are not intelligent enough. We are not humanitarian enough. And so maybe technology could help us as the bridge to move into this better world. And yeah, whatever is going to happen very soon, 10, 20, 30 years, because that is the time we estimate we will be able to cure diseases, but we might be able to have nano weapons. We don't have nano weapons yet. Imagine if we have nuclear technology that could have destroyed humanity, if we have nano weapons that could eliminate all humans. So I don't know if I have answered, but we live in interesting.
Point is, do we have that time with us? I mean, has the future of technology not yet determined? I have read articles that even sun is going to rotate not from anti-clockwise to clockwise. I'm talking about the doomsday.
Okay.
Do we have
you
that
were really
time?
talking, long term, because the sun, for example, well, the sun should probably have like about 4 or 5 billion more years. If we lived even 1 million years, that would be quite a lot for us. But the problem is right now. The next 20 to 30 years are critical, and that is why some people like Stephen Hawking say we need to urgently go to Mars because we might self-destruct ourselves on planet Earth. So we need to leave this planet to guarantee the survival of civilization, of humanity. What will happen after 5 billion years, I don't know. But the advances are so incredible because of these exponential technologies that we might be able to expand the universe, to create another universe, to create another sun, another star. This might be possible not in 5 billion years. This might be possible in 100 years, for what I say. But this is really incredible times. And if we cure diseases in 20 to 30 years, then we will have a lot of time to think about all those issues.
Hi, Doctor. This is Jawad Pracha here. I work for IBM on Watson Technology, plus I'm a subject matter expert for Internet of Things as well. I have 2 questions. Recently, it's being said by Microsoft that the error rate for the AI is reduced to 5.1% against the error rate of 5.9%. So don't you think that AI has right now become smarter than before? And the second question is that there are claims that by 2065, the entire world will not have jobs in terms of humans. And there are talks about having universal basic income by Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg as well. So what are your thoughts about those universal basic incomes thing? Thank you.
Okay, let's answer the second one because people have it in their minds. We are going to lose maybe half of the jobs of humanity in the next 2 decades. In fact, I worry about drivers. Drivers, we do not need drivers in 10 years because we will be driven by the vehicles that will be more interesting and safer and faster than we humans. So just like that, many jobs will disappear at a very fast rate. This has always happened, but not so fast. For example, 50,000 years ago, there was no agriculture even. Agriculture was invented about 10,000 years ago. Therefore, all humans were hunters and gatherers. We were gathering and hunting for food. We worked 7 days per week. Well, there were no weeks, but we worked continuously 24 hours all the time. Then we invented agriculture. And agriculture let us live in a better world and not work one day per week at least. So the Sunday was invented. Then about 200 years ago with the Industrial Revolution, we had a second holiday, which was the Saturday. For some countries, or Friday, whatever. And then we worked less hours. And there were new jobs because we went from being hunters and gatherers to being agriculture people, and now we have lawyers, we have scientists, and so on and so forth. In 20 years, many of the jobs of today will disappear, but we will have new jobs. Some of those jobs actually will be on Mars. One of my favorite jobs for the future is to be a farmer on Mars. Okay? So this is really possible. But in the transition, we need to prepare humanity. And that is why the idea of a universal basic income is being talked about. And that maybe even robots will be taxed to pay the transition, because people need money to survive. And if we don't need some of the jobs of today until those people are retrained and they get new jobs, then we need a guaranteed income for people to keep on living. I think this is really possible. I am in favor of that during the transition period. And even with the new jobs, I think it's going to be better. They are going to be more about manufacturing and less about manufacturing. The jobs of the future will be more interesting, more creative. All the repetition, all the boring jobs will be taken by machines and artificial intelligence. Also, we will have more free time, as I said. Before we had no free days, no days off, then Sunday, then Saturday, then Friday. In California, people are talking about only working 4 days, like they do in France. In France, they have a work week of 35 hours. So I think we're moving into that. The other question about artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is very complicated, and it has many things, like Watson here. Machines, artificial intelligence, they communicate faster than humans because they already have telepathy. You know, they connect themselves through electronics. We need to talk. Talking is slow and is inefficient. So in that communication process, machines are already better than humans. In memory, they are also better. They have unlimited memory, like Watson. Watson has Wikipedia in its head. So we cannot compete with Wikipedia, especially because we forget things. Watson knows everything, and it doesn't forget it, and it communicates very fast. But what we believe is that we are going to merge with this technology. Like we are merged with my glasses. I have my glasses with me, and I have my telephone, and I have my computer. We are going to have these things also more and more connected with us. So they will be part of us. They will complement us. They will augment us. And so I'm not afraid of artificial intelligence because it will make us more intelligent. Do you want to be with intelligent people or with stupid people? Why do you come to KSBL? Because there are intelligent people, right? So you want to be more intelligent, you want to be with intelligent people, and you will want to be more intelligent. And we will be more intelligent, more ethical, and more humanitarian with these new technologies. So I am not afraid of artificial intelligence because we will become more intelligent. What I am afraid of is human stupidity. And human stupidity, sadly, is very natural. It comes with all of us. We are very stupid, naturally. So I want to be more intelligent, and we will become more intelligent and more ethical. Actually, we are already much more ethical than in the past. To give an example, 5,000 years ago, we used to eat our enemies. We ate our enemies. We were cannibals in many civilizations in the planet. And this was normal. And not only was it normal, it was nutritious. 2,000 years ago in Greece, when they invented democracy, they had slaves. 20% of the population of Greece were slaves. And it was normal for the slave to be a slave because they lost a war. And if they lost the war, they had to be slaves. We had slaves until very recently. And today we don't have slaves. We don't have cannibals. And women vote. 100 years ago, the president of the USA said that intelligent women knew that they did not have to vote. Imagine the president of the USA, even Trump, saying that. Impossible to say that. So anyway, I think we are more ethical, more knowledgeable, more humanitarian, and this trend should continue. And once we have more intelligence, we will live in a better world.
In the interest of time, if we could address any further questions after the session.
Okay, one last.
Okay.
Yes, hello, my name is Neera Rahman. I have two questions on what you just said. The first is about technology creating new opportunities. I agree with that. But does it address something like technology for the disenfranchised? For example, you mentioned Uber. So in Pakistan, services like Uber have created opportunities for the poor, but the benefit is very short-term. In the scenario of driverless cars, these people who have learned how to drive merely to be part of that service will be no longer needed. Second, earlier in your presentation, you mentioned that AI might be winning the Nobel Prize for literature. Now, if we put this against the fact that in the future people will have more free time and will cultivate their interests, my question is, what will they do with those interests if there won't be a marketplace and a robot will be able to outperform them in that? Thank you.
So in economics of demand and supply, we're saying that robots will take on most of the jobs in the next 20 years. And we're beating death, right? So death is it's a disease that we want to beat. So we'll have more people with lesser to do. So how are we managing any of that in the future?
Okay, very good questions, and many questions, and I have a limited brain. I was looking for my pen. I didn't find it, so I had to write. I tried to write, so I forgot some of the things. We don't know the potential still of the human brain, and we don't know how many more things we are going to do with this human brain, which is the one we have had for 100,000 years. And 100,000 years, we didn't know anything that we know today. In fact, as I mentioned, the wheel was invented only about 5,000 years. You would have expected humans to be smarter than that. You know, it took us thousands and thousands of years to invent the wheel. So, okay, most disadvantaged people will have access to these technologies that will help to equalize the potential, because the technologies actually become very cheap when they become democratic, like mobile phones. The first mobile phones cost thousands of dollars. They lasted very little, and they were very big, and they only did one thing, more or less, which was to make phone calls. Today, smartphones do everything. They are very cheap, and everybody in the whole planet has a mobile phone. And the mobile phones of today are caca compared to the mobile phones in 2 or 3 years, when everybody will have free internet access throughout the planet. So they will have access to better education. Education is moving into the digital world, into the cloud. And I think technologies begin very expensive and very bad. But when they are democratized, they become very cheap and very good, very efficient. So the cost of living actually is being reduced in the sense that we can do more things with less money. Today, people actually have more money relative to food, to housing, to transportation. And this trend will continue because those services are becoming cheaper. Food is going to be cheaper in 10 years. Telecommunications is going to be cheaper. So people with less money will be able to do more things. So I think this is important. And we will have the universal basic income that I mentioned before during this transition period. That was, I think, the first question, and I forgot the second. Okay. Yeah, that's a very good question. And this is a Western question, and including Pakistan in the West. Because in the East, in Japan, they see the world very differently. Very, very differently. And I will tell you about robots. I lived 3 years in Tokyo, So I know enough of the Japanese culture. And that is why I mentioned that they consider that robots have a soul. They have a soul in Japan, the robots. I never saw it, but apparently they have a soul. And they like robots. They think that robots are a complement to humans, and so much that some people actually want to get married to a robot. One of the best-selling books in Japan a few years back was How to Make Love to a Robot. You might be horrified, but not the Japanese. The Japanese were looking for the robots. I will give you an example that you might understand also. Not robots, because robots are bad in the West, but they are good in the East. Robots are good in Japan and in Korea. And they are helping humans. They help humans. They don't want to destroy humans. They want to help humans. I'll give you an example also similar, which is dragons. You know dragons. Dragons in the Western tradition in Europe, they are bad. They kill people. They throw fire. They destroy cities. In Japan, in China, dragons are good. The dragon is the symbol of the Emperor of Japan and the Emperor of China when there was a dragon. So it's the same concept. You might think that robots are bad, but in the East, robots are good. You might think that dragons are bad, but in the East, dragons are good. So it is in our minds in a way. But what I'm talking about is the fusion between the human-machine civilization. Also, this will become important in 10 years when we go to Mars, because we will depend a lot on the machines, because our physical, biological bodies are not good for space, so we will need more and more things and collaboration from machines in the future. So we will reconsider everything that means to be human very soon, in 10 years, when we go to Mars. Interesting times, interesting times. So going back to the other question about what will humans do, I think we will do more things which are creative, interesting, and we will fuse with the technology. And I want you to try to understand this. We humans have an IQ, intellectual coefficient, of 100, okay? That is the average. If you are very stupid, you have a 70. Which is the IQ of a chimpanzee also. A chimpanzee has about 70 IQ. A human average has 100. We are at KSBL, probably here it is 130. And then Albert Einstein maybe was 300, okay? Or Newton, or Da Vinci. What is going to happen now with artificial intelligence is that we are going to reach a human superintelligence, and we are not going to become like Einstein 300. We are going to become maybe 300,000 of what we are today. And again, I'll explain why. We are going to have unlimited memory. We are going to have unlimited speed connected to our brains. So it is very different. And then how about having many people? As I was trying to explain, the population of the planet is stabilizing, and it is declining in all advanced nations. Only countries that are not very developed yet, including Pakistan, but Pakistan's population also is not going to be 400 million people. It probably, I don't know the numbers, the latest projections, but all the projections actually have been going down. So maybe Pakistan will stabilize at 300 million people. But anyway, that will be more than compensated by the 200 million that China will lose. Okay? So if there are too many people, go to China. With the China-Pakistan economic corridor, you can get very quickly to China. So actually, another thing, in economic terms, I showed that the GDP is increasing. Okay, throughout history, the GDP per capita is increasing throughout the planet. What does this mean in economic terms? That there are too many humans, or that there are too few humans? It means that we are few. If our salaries, if the GDP is increasing, it's because we are scarce. We are scarce. If we were too many, the salaries would be coming down. So Actually, I also said that the brain is the most complex structure in the universe that we know of today. Therefore, we want more brains or less brains. A human doesn't come just with a mouth and a behind. We come with a brain, and the brain can create, can imagine, can do fantastic things. So that is why our human value is increasing, not decreasing. It is increasing. The GDP per capita is increasing. The salaries are increasing. And this trend will continue. And even more once we have artificial intelligence. With us, for us, in us. This is not an invasion of artificial intelligence from Mars. No. This is being done here for humans, with humans, in humans.
Thank you. On behalf of the student body at KSBL, I would like to offer our gratitude to you for taking time out today and giving us such an invigorating and insightful conversation about what the future holds. And it has incited our interest to look forward to the future. It sure does look promising. I would like to invite Dr. Zishan Ahmed, Acting Rector and Dean KSBL, to say a few words.
Well, thank you, Dr. Jose, for such an, what should I say, fascinating, thrilling, and exciting presentation. But I would confess that it was scary too. My heart was beating faster. I don't know if that was happening to you again. I had the same feeling when I saw the first episode of Terminator, when I was 12. And when I was walking in, I asked the same question: is Singularity going to turn into the apocryphal scenario that Terminator projects? And he reassured me and calmed my nerves. But after this presentation, it's back again, How do we know if it's a Western robot or an Eastern robot? Yeah? So we don't know that, right? So one of the things is that, but he can you can talk us out of this fear, but the other fear he cannot talk us out of is where we are. He has a very good positive notions about KSBL in Pakistan. But let me recall, presented in a form of metaphor that I was very fascinated with when I was a kid. One of my relatives had this picture on the wall where there were 3 monkeys. And one monkey was, showing some tricks, jumping and all. The second monkey was watching him in fascination. And the third monkey was scratching his head. And the caption read that there are 3 types of people in this world: those who make things happen, those who understand what's going on, and the third one who wonder what happened. And if we have to classify our own nation, this is a very privileged audience. It's in that top 1%. But as a nation, we have to decide in which group we want to be, because this is a tipping point. If we don't wake up soon, if we don't join the bandwagon of technological improvement, if we don't develop our science vision, technology vision, value addition vision, we may be pretty much doomed or fall a lot behind. All the needs, right, from security all the way to self-esteem. When we hear about India launching a very ambitious space plan and we have nothing on the cards, don't you think this is not just about self-esteem, it's also about security? So all those needs in the Maslow's hierarchy in between are all related to those things. And we are very fortunate to have you, sir, here to enlighten us and to wake us up. And I think there's a lot that we have to do. With those things, I thank you again for your brilliant presentation, and we'd like to have you here more often. Thank you, sir.
I would now like to invite Mr. Munir Kamal to present a token of appreciation to our honorable guest.
I also get scared.
Yeah.
Just so you remember this.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was
I also get scared, huh? So he was scared, I also get scared, but we have to look at the opportunity. So because these things are going to happen, and I think Japan is going to develop some of these technologies, South Korea, and where do we want to be? And I am also scared, so I share with you that feeling. But it is positively scared.
We are grateful to DH Corporation for sponsoring today's Eminent Speaker Series at KSBL, and we are grateful to the Management Association of Pakistan for inviting Dr. Cordeiro to Pakistan. Thank you. Please join us in the cafeteria for some tea.